Yes, well, back with you. Jim Burns again. Hello. What we got going on here today is some LED work. In our first picture here, you can see I've already drilled the lens for the front of the boiler. Um, the final size is 7/64 of an inch, and that gives a 3mm warm white LED a nice snug fit inside there. Doesn't have to be very deep. I think it's only like 1/8 of an inch deep, and most of the LED will fit in there. I think that's about it on this one. We'll go to the next slide here and I'll tell you what's going on there. Okay, in this picture I'm showing the lens with the 3mm LED inserted into the back. The wires are going off to the rectifier and resistor, but yeah, it's a nice snug fit. You can push it in, pull it out numerous times. It never gets loose or anything, which is good because we got to put the lens back in the boiler front, and then the LED comes in from behind. And pretty simple application right here. Okay, in this photo, you can see the lens is in the boiler front, the LED's in the lens, and I've got it hooked up to some test leads. I'm just using batteries right here. I've bypassed the rectifier and resistor. You only need 2 AA batteries to test a 3-volt LED like this, so I just bypassed everything. But yeah, you can see it makes a nice light. Okay, and then here's just a close-up view of the headlight. Nice warm white glow to it. Looks real nice. Okay, now moving on into our classification lights here. These are those pico-sized LEDs. They're very small. And these are green in color. They'll go into classification lights. That's magnet wire that's already attached. They are 3-volt also, but you can use them with the rectifier and the resistor. I'll be tying all 3 lights together, the headlight and the 2 classification lights, and then you can go into the resistor / rectifier and then go on into connections inside the motor or the housing. And then this will get bent at the back, so the lens will face forward, but the wire is bent just enough to fit through the tiny hole in the classification housing. I'll show that in a minute, but we'll go on to the next one. This will start to make sense. Okay, in this one I've got the LED clamped to a steel rule, and very gently, they're very, they're not very fragile, but they're fragile enough. You don't want to be crushing them. It's just a very slight spring pressure on that clamp. I modified the clamp just to hold it. I took the rubber off the tips and bent the ends of it down so I could get a good grip on the LED. So anyhow, that's bent over 90 degrees over the edge of that steel roller. All right, we'll move on to the next. Okay, this shows the result of bending the wire over that ruler. And just keep in mind, this is all very tiny stuff. I'm zooming in pretty far with the camera lens, so you can get a good look at everything. But when you're just looking at this pico-sized LED under normal circumstances, you can barely see that lens. Okay, here I'm just testing the LED to make sure it still works after bending the wire. And as you can see, it does. Okay, here I'm threading the wire through the hole in the classification light. And what I use, I'll show you in the next picture, but this is, you get it to this point here before you do anything else, and then I'll show you in the next picture what's going on. Okay, I use this black liquid tape. It comes in a jar with a brush in it, but I put a little tiny bit inside that cupped out area in the classification light, just as you see the LED sitting there, and then I pull it tight from behind and let the liquid tape set up, and I'll show you in the next picture what it looks like. But you don't want to put it in the liquid tape in before you start threading the wire, or it'll be all over your wire all the way through, so, or all the way along the length of that wire. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, here it is seated into the liquid tape, and you can see there's just a little bit of liquid tape on the first eighth of an inch of that wire behind the LED or the classification light fixture. And that's okay because it's going to get coated anyway when it goes down into the grooves to access the rear of the boiler. Boy, can I talk? Apparently not. Okay, here in this one we're just giving you an overall view. You can see I used a little piece of wire to fill that little cupped out area of the classification light and then pulled it taut. And then once it's dry, I'll show you in the next picture our result. Okay, here in this picture you can see it's lit up. Well, it's just test leads again, nothing fancy, just checking it with the batteries, making sure each step I go, I test it with the batteries. And even in the next photos when I route it through the grooves to access the back of the boiler, it's I'll test them again once it's dried and put in place. Okay, what we got going on here, this is the rear of the smoke box, and the red clamp is holding the wire down inside the groove. That's it's clamped over the classification light, so it's holding the wire down inside the groove. The bolt you see laying there on the inside of the boiler front, that's just added weight just to keep the wire down inside there. But what I do here is I paint the groove that I cut with the moto tool. I paint it with the liquid tape first, then guide the wire down inside the groove, and then paint it again with the liquid tape over top of that. And then that just kind of ensures that the positive side isn't going to short out to the casing of the boiler front. So once this is dry, I'll clean up the extra liquid tape there so it'll seat nicely. You have to do this because if you just try to guide your wires down through there, your boiler front's never going to seat properly and look nice. So this puts it below the surface, and then when you put your boiler front back on your locomotive, it'll all mate nice and clean. Alright. Okay, now we're going to move on to our second classification light. And in this picture you see the groove in the back of the boiler front, and the classification light fixture right above that. Alright. Okay, and then here in this picture I've put a coating of liquid tape in the classification light on the front. And like I said before, get your wire started first and just leave like a ½ an inch so you can fill the classification light with the liquid tape, and then pull the LED down into the classification light, bitting it into the tape. Okay, now here's a picture of after I've pulled it through and the LED is seated into the liquid tape, into the classification fixture, and that'll work out real nice. Okay, now onto the back of the boiler front. I'm showing here the wire laid into the groove. This is what I do not want. I don't want the magnet wire, even though it's covered with varnish, or coated with it. I don't want that laying up against the metal, the bare metal in that groove. So what I do is I take a little thin coat of the liquid tape and I coat inside the groove first, and then after that sets up just for a couple of seconds, get a little tacky and stiffer, then I set the wire in the groove, and it'll show more on the next picture. Okay, now you can see I've just coated the groove with that liquid tape. Just wait for it to get a little tacky, stiffen up, not completely dry, just a little bit of a tackiness to it, and then I'll set the wire down inside. And that'll keep it from touching the bare metal. Okay, and then after that's done, I've got my clamp on the classification light again and the bolt, using it as a weight, keeping the wire guided down through the groove. And once this is all dry, I'll test the light, make sure everything's working. Remember, keep checking the lights each step you make, because I've had it happen before. The more you work with the wire, you know, that varnish will start to crack, and maybe you'll wind up with a short. And luckily it's only 3 volts, but still, it's enough to damage your LED. Okay, here we are in the next day, and I've turned the boiler front over and hooked up the leads to the battery again, and 3 volts. And there's your class lights lit up. Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Okay, now in this picture I've added the headlight lens. I've inserted the 3mm LED into that. Tied all the wires together. Still on battery. 3 volts will light all this stuff, so it's good just to keep testing as you make each step, because nothing worse than putting it all together on your locomotive and have to tear it all apart because something's not working, the wire got pinched. Make sure it's good before you put her all together. So now after this, I'll have to combine all the wires in the back, shorten them all up, connect them to the rectifier / resistor, and then we'll move on to adding it to the front of the boiler. And I'll give you a picture of that, but I'll show you the back, all the connections I've made, and that'll be in the next picture. Now in these next 4 photographs that'll scroll by while I'm talking, what I'm going to do here ultimately is use the chassis as the ground, or the negative side of the rectifier. Instead of running both wires back to the motor case, which I usually do, I'm going to try and use the chassis as the ground, or the negative side. I've never done this before, so we'll give it a whirl, see what happens. But anyway, in the first picture here, we got a 1/32 inch drill going through the former lamp holder on the back of the boiler front. And in the second photograph there, it's a number 50 drill, or .0700. That'll be our tap size drill. And then over here, number 3 picture, we've got the tap going on. And in number 4, you see the screw I'm putting in there. And I'll straighten out that little curve there before I finish off. But so I'm going to wrap the wire around there for the negative or ground side of the rectifier. And then the other lead I'll tie up into the the old light bulb socket, the hot side, and I'll show you what happens after that. Now here is the back of the boiler front. Shows all the wiring that I did. Soldered all the wires from the LEDs, the positive and negatives, tied them all together, along with that coiled lead there. That's the pigtail that'll plug into the rectifier, which you see shooting off to the right there for the moment. But I just wanted you to see I got all the wires cut and tucked in there into the old lamp holder there, that bracket, and the screws ready to accept the negative side of the rectifier. And then I put the heat shrink tubing over the ends of the magnet wire and shrunk that down, and then sealed each end with the liquid tape. And I'll mention this again, I mentioned it in one of my earlier videos, but the best way to get the shellac off of the magnet wire, because it gets sticky as soon as you try to sand it off or whatever you have, is just put some plumber's paste flux on there and then heat it with the soldering iron, and as the paste flux sizzles away, it takes the shellac with it, and you're left with a nice clean wire. So that'll give you an idea how to get that clean without grinding your teeth trying to get that shellac off of there. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. This was, by the way, all done under a lighted magnifier with tweezers twisting the wires, needle nose pliers holding them still. So just so you know, it's tiny work. Now here we have the rectifier. It's all tucked into that same bracket that used to hold the light bulb, the incandescent bulb. And now I just got to trim the wires, wrap one around that screw, and the other will tie into the hot lead that fed the old incandescent bulb base. And we'll show you what it looks like when I get that done. Now in this photo, I've flipped the boiler front back over, testing it once again, made another step, make another test. So she's all lit up. Now it's running off of the rectifier now, the AC voltage from the transformers going to the clips you see there in the picture, and she's working fine. Okay, this picture here, that's just a close-up, same position, same setup, AC voltage feeding the rectifier, and then the resistor dropping it down to 3 volts to feed the LEDs. Okay, we're at the rear of the boiler front again. I just wanted to show you the final wiring on that. You'll see the one of the leads from the rectifier is going to the screw that I installed. Pinch that under the screw. That'll give us our chassis ground. The other wire will head off to the hot lead for the light bulb that used to feed the incandescent light. Now in this picture, there's the boiler itself. It's without the front on it. And the wire you see is the lead for the original light bulb, the incandescent light. And what I did was I just temporarily tied the rectifier lead into that. Just coated it with some liquid tape. This is just a test, so I got more work to do on the locomotive, so I just want to make sure it's insulated from the chassis and give it a test. Ain't it purty? There she is, mated back up to her boiler and all lit up. Getting closer to being finished. Okay, there's the boiler front in all her glory. Unlit at the moment. But I was just showing, I put the railing back on, and I designed and printed out my own keystone for the front with the number 2025 on the Keystone. I used that printer sticky paper, or self-adhesive paper, and designed my own border around the Keystone and cut it out with the razor blade and scissors. Stuck it on there. I love it. Ta-da! And once again, look at her. Lit up. Railing. Keystone. What more can you ask for? This is beautiful. I'm bragging here. But yeah, there she is. She's sitting on some track with the test leads from the AC transformer onto the 3 rails, and she's lit up. She's ready to go. Well, I got a lot more work to do on the locomotive itself, so I'll be removing this front again. But there she is. I'm loving it. Thanks for watching, guys and gals.